Nebraska,
There you go,
December
nice and fluffy.
2005.
Wow,
The
that's
farmhouse
nice
sits
big.
quiet in the winter
All done.
afternoon.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Daniel Cooper, 82 years old, watches snowfall beyond the window. His granddaughter Emily arranges the recording equipment on the kitchen table. She's 20, a history major at the State University, and she's come to interview him for her senior thesis on World War II veterans. "Grandpa," she says, adjusting the microphone, "they told me you served as a prison guard for German POWs. Is that right?" Cooper turns from the window, his eyes still sharp despite his age focused on something distant, something 60 years gone but never forgotten. "That's right," he says. His voice carries the weight of decades. "Camp Riverside, Pennsylvania, August through December 1945. Was it difficult guarding the enemy?" Cooper moves to the table, sits slowly, his hands weathered from a lifetime of farm work fold together. He's silent for a long moment. "Emily," he says finally, "I'm going to tell you a story I've never told anyone except your grandmother, about 43 German women, about a county fair in Pennsylvania, and about cotton candy that changed how I saw the world." Emily leans forward. The recording light blinks red. "It started," Cooper says, "on the day the war ended. Camp Riverside, Pennsylvania, August 15th, 1945. Private Daniel Cooper stood at the gate watching the trucks arrive. 22 years old, farm boy from Nebraska, wearing a uniform that still felt foreign after 2 years of service. Around him, the compound buzzed with victory celebrations. Japan had surrendered. The war finally was over. But Cooper's war was just beginning. The trucks carried 43 women in gray uniforms, German Women's Auxiliary Corps, captured in France during the final chaotic weeks before Germans' surrender. They climbed down from the vehicles slowly, their movements careful and measured. Cooper had expected soldiers, hard faces, defiant eyes. What he saw instead made his stomach tighten. They were starving, not metaphorically, actually starving. Hollow cheeks, thin wrists, uniforms that hung loose on frames that had clearly been larger once. They moved with the careful economy of people who had learned to conserve every ounce of energy. Cooper gripped his rifle tighter. He had prepared himself to face enemies, had steeled himself for confrontation. But these women looked less like soldiers and more like survivors, and that confused him in ways he didn't want to examine. One woman stood at the center of the group, dark blonde hair pulled into a tight military bun, posture straight despite obvious exhaustion. Her eyes scanned the camp with calculated precision, assessing threats, noting exits, cataloging everything. A leader. Cooper recognized the stance, the way the others looked to her for silent guidance. Their eyes met for a moment. Hers were gray, empty of emotion. The practiced neutrality of someone who had learned not to show fear or hope or anything that could be used against her. Cooper looked away first. Captain Dorothy Mitchell emerged from the administration building, 35 years old, stern but fair. She had specifically requested this assignment when the women arrived from France, against opposition from officers who thought female prisoners didn't deserve a female commander. "Private Cooper," she called. "My office, now." Cooper followed her inside. The office smelled of coffee and paperwork. Mitchell sat behind her desk and gestured for him to remain standing. "Military protocol. These women are not enemy combatants," she said without preamble. "They're clerks, nurses, radio operators. Most were conscripted. They committed no war crimes." Cooper said nothing. His jaw was tight. "You will treat them with dignity," Mitchell continued. Her eyes were hard. "No cruelty, no abuse. We are not Nazis, Private. We don't punish people for existing." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am." The words came out clipped, formal. Mitchell studied him. "I know you lost your cousin at Normandy. I know this is difficult, but I need to know you can do this job properly." Cooper met her gaze. "I can do my job, ma'am." "Good, because your first task is to bring them their evening meal. Show them to the mess hall. Make sure they understand they're safe here." Safe. The word stuck in Cooper's throat. These women had served Hitler. They'd been part of the machine that killed his cousin. That killed thousands, millions. And he was supposed to make them feel safe, but orders were orders. He saluted, turned, left. The barracks where the women were housed sat at the eastern edge of camp. Cooper approached with the dinner schedule in hand. Through the windows, he could see them inside sitting on cots, talking in low German voices. When he knocked, the conversation stopped instantly. He opened the door. 43 pairs of eyes turned to him. The terror in those eyes hit him like a physical blow. They weren't looking at a guard. They were looking at something they feared deeply. The youngest one, couldn't have been more than 19, actually shrank back against the wall. Cooper suddenly understood. The propaganda had worked both ways. If Americans had been taught that Germans were monsters, what had Germans been taught about Americans? Dinner, he managed to say. His voice sounded harsh even to his own ears. Mess hall, follow me. The blonde woman, the leader, stood first. She said something in German. The others rose slowly, forming into two lines with military precision. Even starving and exhausted, they maintained discipline. Cooper led them across the compound. Other soldiers stopped to stare. Some made comments. Cooper ignored them. The women walked in silence, eyes forward, faces neutral. They had clearly practiced this. How to move through hostile territory without drawing attention. The mess hall was standard military issue. Long tables, bench seats, the smell of institutional food. To Cooper, who'd eaten army rations for 2 years, it was nothing special. But he watched the women's faces as they entered. Several stopped walking. One made a small sound, quickly stifled. The serving line offered meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, bread milk. Standard GI fare. Nothing fancy, but the portions were generous, more food than Cooper usually bothered to eat. The German woman at the front of the line, the blonde leader, took the smallest portions possible. Her hands shook as she held the tray. When she sat down, she stared at the food for a long moment before touching it. Cooper stood against the wall observing. His job was to maintain order, to prevent incidents. But he found himself watching not for security threats, but for something else. Something that made him deeply uncomfortable. The youngest one, the girl who'd shrunk from him, took her first bite of bread. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't make a sound, just sat there crying silently while she chewed. An older woman, must have been a nurse based on the medical corps insignia still visible on her worn uniform, cut her meatloaf into tiny pieces, making it last, savoring each bite with an intensity that spoke of long deprivation. The blonde leader, after her first swallow, closed her eyes. The expression on her face was something Cooper couldn't name. Grief. Both Sergeant Thomas Bradford, Cooper's immediate superior, moved beside him. Bradford was 40, had actually seen combat in Europe, had the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd witnessed things that couldn't be unsaid. First time seeing it, Bradford asked quietly. Seeing what, Sarge? Real hunger, not discomfort, not rationing, actual starvation. Cooper watched the women eat. They're that bad off. Bradford nodded. I was in France when we liberated it, saw German civilians. By 1944, they were starving. Their own government was taking food from the people to feed the war machine. These women, he gestured, they probably survived on 800 calories a day, maybe less. 800 calories. Cooper did rough math. That was less than half what a person needed. These women had been starving while fighting a war they'd been told was for their survival. One of the women approached Cooper, the leader. She stood at what passed for attention, though exhaustion made the posture imperfect. Sir, she said in heavily accented English. May I speak? Yes. Cooper's voice was carefully neutral. The food. This is more than I have eaten in one meal in 2 years. She paused. Her gray eyes met his directly. Thank you. 2 simple words. Thank you. Said with such quiet sincerity that Cooper felt something crack inside his chest. Not break, just crack, like ice beginning to thaw. It's standard rations, he said. Defensive, nothing special. To us, it is everything. She held his gaze a moment longer, then returned to her table. Cooper stood there, rifle in hand, watching enemies eat. Except they didn't look like enemies anymore. They looked like people who'd been lied to, people who'd suffered, people who were trying to understand why their captors were being kind. That night, Cooper pulled guard duty outside the barracks. Standard rotation. Walk the perimeter. Watch for trouble. Make sure no one tried to escape. He heard crying through the walls. Not loud, muffled, but unmistakable. The youngest one's voice speaking in German. I'm still so hungry, but I was afraid to take more. What if they take it away tomorrow? Another voice, the blonde leader. gentle, maternal almost. Tomorrow you eat more, I promise, they won't take it away. How do you know? Because Private Cooper gave me his word, and I believe him. Cooper stood frozen. She believed him. They'd spoken maybe 10 words, and somehow she decided to trust him. The weight of that trust settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. He thought about his cousin, Jimmy, killed on Omaha Beach. Thought about the hatred he'd carried for 2 years, the desire for revenge against anyone who'd worn a German uniform. But how did you take revenge on people who'd already suffered more than you could imagine? How did you hate someone who cried over bread? The questions kept him awake until dawn. Nebraska, 1943. Cooper's voice shifts. Emily watches her grandfather's face change as he travels backward through time. To understand what happened next, he says, you need to know who I was. 22 years old, never left Nebraska before the draft. Knew about war from newsreels and radio broadcasts. He was born in 1923, grew up during the Depression, learned to work hard, complain, never make do with less. His father had fought in the First World War, came back different, quieter, with nightmares he never explained. Duty above all, his father taught him. Country first, personal feelings second. When the draft notice came in 1943, Cooper was 20, just starting to think about proposing to Betty Henderson, the girl from the neighboring farm, the one who'd waited for him through basic training. They'd given him a week before reporting. He'd spent it working the fields, memorizing the smell of Nebraska soil, trying to burn the memory of home into his brain so deeply it couldn't be erased. Betty had cried when he left, made him promise to come home, to write, to remember her. He'd meant to keep those promises, meant to stay the same person who left. But war changed everyone, even those who never saw combat. Cooper was too valuable as military police. 6'2", strong, good at following orders. They kept him stateside guarding prisoners, first German soldiers. Men captured in North Africa and Italy. Dangerous, hostile, men who'd spit at guards and plan escape attempts. Then came the female prisoners. August 1945, 43 women who looked nothing like soldiers. I wanted to hate them, Cooper tells Emily. His voice is rough. Needed to hate them because hating them meant honoring Jimmy, meant his death had meaning. Emily doesn't interrupt, just watches the recording light blink. But then I saw them eat. September 20th, 1945. 3 weeks had passed. Cooper had settled into routine, escort duty, meal supervision, perimeter checks. The women had gained weight on American rations. Not much, but enough that their uniforms didn't hang quite so loose. He'd learned their names without meaning to. Ellen Bradford, the blonde leader, 24 years old, communications specialist. Grace Miller, the youngest, 19, farm girl from Bavaria. Margaret Clark, the nurse, practical, analytical. Ruth Baker, supply coordinator, 26, protected the younger women like a mother hen. Learning their names felt like betrayal, like humanizing the enemy, but Cooper couldn't stop himself. Captain Mitchell called a formation that morning, all 43 women standing at attention in the compound yard, Cooper and Bradford flanking them. Tomorrow, Mitchell announced, you're going to the county fair. Silence, then confused whispers in German. Ellen Bradford stepped forward slightly. Captain, I do not understand. A fair for us? Yes, a local celebration, harvest festival. You'll attend as my guests. More whispers, louder now. The women looked at each other with expressions Cooper couldn't read. Suspicion, hope, fear. This is some kind of test, Ellen asked. Her English had improved over 3 weeks. Or punishment. Mitchell's expression softened. Neither. I want you to see American peacetime, to understand that we're not what you were taught. Ellen's face remained neutral, but something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like the beginning of understanding. After formation, Cooper approached her, broke protocol to do it, but he needed to know. Ma'am, he said, what were you taught about Americans? Ellen studied him, calculating whether to answer truthfully. That you were barbarians, she said finally, that you tortured prisoners, that you celebrated soul offering, that you were barely civilized. She paused. Were we wrong? Cooper had no answer because he'd been taught almost identical things about Germans. That night he couldn't sleep. lay in his bunk thinking about propaganda, about Lassie, about how easy it was to hate people you'd never met. September 21st, 1945. The trucks arrived at the fairgrounds mid-morning. Cooper drove the lead vehicle with 10 women, including Ellen, in the back. They'd been silent during the drive through Pennsylvania countryside, watching the landscape, the intact farms, the grazing cattle, the absence of destruction. When they arrived, the sounds hit first. Children's laughter, music from a brass band, bells from carnival games. Then the smells: popcorn, roasted nuts, caramel. Sugar spun into 1,000 different forms. Cooper watched the women's faces as they climbed from the trucks. They looked overwhelmed, not by the fair itself, but by what it represented. Abundance, celebration, normalcy. Everything they'd been denied for years. He led them through the main gate. Captain Mitchell had insisted on no obvious guards, no restraints. She wanted them to experience this as people, not prisoners. The fairway stretched before them. Bright banners, game booths, food vendors, families everywhere. Cooper saw it through their eyes for the first time, saw the casual waste, the easy plenty, the children running with more energy than they needed. Ellen stopped walking, stared at something ahead. Cooper followed her gaze. A vendor stand. A middle-aged man in a striped apron spinning pink clouds onto paper cones. Cotton candy. Children clustered around each holding their impossibly fluffy creation. Grace, the youngest, grabbed Ellen's arm, said something in rapid German. Ellen shook her head, equally confused. Captain Mitchell approached the vendor, bought 10 portions, turned and offered them to the German women with a smile that said everything words couldn't. Ellen took hers like it might explode, held it at arm's length. The other women followed her lead, suspicious, uncertain. Grace moved first. She always did, bravest in small ways. Her finger extended, barely touching the spun sugar. Her eyes went wide. "It's disappearing," she whispered, loud enough for Cooper to hear. "I barely touched it, and it vanished." The others leaned in, fascinated despite their wariness. Margaret, the nurse, pressed her finger into her portion, watched it dissolve, brought the residue to her lips. Her entire expression transformed. Cooper watched this unfold like a revelation. These women who'd survived starvation, who'd endured deprivation he couldn't imagine. They were treating cotton candy like something sacred. Not because it was food, because it was proof. Proof that a world existed where sugar could be wasted on beauty, where children ate clouds, where abundance was so complete that frivolity was possible. Ellen finally brought the pink fluff to her lips. Cooper saw the moment it touched her tongue, saw her face change. Not joy exactly, something deeper. The dissolution of belief, the crumbling of everything she'd been taught. He approached without thinking. "It's just sugar," he said, heated and spun. "Nothing special." Ellen looked at him. Her gray eyes were wet. "Just sugar," she repeated. "Just sugar spun into something unnecessary. Something beautiful. Something that exists only to bring happiness." She held up the cotton candy, watched it catch the sunlight. "Private Cooper," she said quietly, "we were taught Americans were suffering, that your children were starving, that your cities were destroyed, that you were losing the war of resources." She gestured at the fair, at the abundance, at the casual waste. "But you have this. You had this the entire time." Cooper had no response, because she was right. While Germans starved Americans, spun sugar into toys. While German cities burned American children, played at fairs. The asymmetry was staggering. An old man approached, face red with anger. Cooper recognized him. Robert Harrison, lost a nephew at the Battle of the Bulge, vocal opponent of bringing German prisoners to public events. "What the hell is this?" Harrison demanded, loud enough to draw attention. "Nazis at our fair eating our food." Cooper moved between Harrison and the women. Instinct, training, something else. "Sir, these women are prisoners under my protection." "Your protection?" Harrison's voice rose. "They're the enemy, boy. They don't deserve protection. They deserve justice." Cooper felt the women behind him tense, felt Ellen shift into a protective stance over the younger ones, felt his own anger rise. "No, sir," he said, surprised by the steadiness of his voice. The enemy was the regime that lied to them, just like it lied to us. These women are people who were caught in something they didn't choose. Harrison stared at him. You defending them Germans who killed your own cousin? I'm defending human beings who've been starved and lied to and used. Yes, sir, I am. The moment stretched. Harrison's face worked through several emotions. Anger, confusion, something that might have been respect. He turned and walked away without another word. Cooper turned back to the women. They were watching him with expressions he couldn't name. Ellen stepped forward slightly. Why did you do that? She asked. Defend us. Cooper looked at the cotton candy in her hand, at the pink sugar dissolving slowly in the September sun, at the proof that everything could change if you let it. Because you're making me question everything I thought I knew, he said, and I don't like easy answers anymore. Emily stops the recording, looks at her grandfather. He's staring out the window again at the Nebraska snow. Grandpa, she says softly, that was the moment, wasn't it, when you changed? Cooper nods slowly. That was the moment I realized enemies are just people on the other side of lies. And that truth, real truth, dissolves hatred just like sugar dissolves on your tongue. Quick, complete, leaving only sweetness behind. He turns to face her. The question is what you do with that sweetness. Whether you swallow it and let it change you, or whether you spit it out and cling to hatred because it's familiar. What did you do? I swallowed it, Emily, and it changed everything. Viết tiếp Part 2 theo dạng email với đôi giai 4.000 từ 13-28. Orchestrated narrative structure for Bon Yin Word Part 2 installment. September 22, 1945. Cooper woke before dawn with cotton candy on his mind. Not the taste, the symbolism. Sugar spun into proof that everything he'd believed was incomplete at best lies at worst. He dressed in the dark barracks. Around him, other military police soldiers slept. Private Williams snored in the bunk beside him. Williams, who'd called the German women Nazis, who'd said they deserved whatever they got. Williams, who made Cooper's new understanding feel like betrayal. The morning was cold, Pennsylvania autumn creeping in. Cooper walked the perimeter of camp, breath misting in the air. He passed the women's barracks, saw lamplight in one window. Someone else couldn't sleep. He knocked, soft, not wanting to startle them. The door opened. Ellen Bradford stood there still in her gray uniform. She'd been writing something, a letter maybe. Private Cooper. She didn't sound surprised. Is something wrong? No, He stopped. What was he doing? I wanted to check if you needed anything. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Recognition, understanding that this wasn't protocol. We are well, thank you. She paused. The cotton candy. I have been thinking about it all night. Yeah, me too. They stood there in the doorway, guard and prisoner, American and German, two people trying to make sense of a senseless thing. What were you told about us? Ellen asked. Before you came here. Cooper looked at his boots. That you were monsters, that you deserved no mercy, that showing kindness was weakness. And now I think maybe the monsters were the people who taught us to hate each other. Ellen's face remained neutral, but her voice carried weight. That is dangerous thinking for a soldier. Yeah, I'm starting to realize that. She studied him for a long moment. Private Cooper, I heard what you did yesterday at the fair, defending us to that man. Just doing my job. No, her voice was firm. You risked your reputation. You chose to see us as human when it would have been easier to let him attack. Why? Cooper had no easy answer. Because I looked at Grace crying over bread, and I thought about my sister back home. Same age. Just born in a different country. That's the only difference. Ellen nodded slowly. You are beginning to understand what took me months to see. That geography is not morality. That flags are not character. How long have you known? Since the cotton candy dissolved on my tongue and I realized everything I fought for was built on sugar that could not last. Cooper left her there, walked back to his barracks, lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling until the wake-up call sounded. Something had shifted. He'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. From guard to something else. Something that felt like responsibility. September 22nd. Morning. Grace Miller looked sick at breakfast, pale, shaking slightly. Cooper watched her push food around her plate without eating. He approached. "Miss Miller, you okay?" She looked up. Fear flashed across her face, quickly hidden. "Yes, sir." "You're not eating." "I am saving it for later." Cooper crouched beside her chair, brought himself to eye level. "Grace, why are you saving it?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "In case the food stops, in case yesterday was test and we failed, I must have food stored." The trauma, the deep biological fear that kindness was temporary, that starvation was always one day away. Cooper stood, walked to the kitchen, came back with an extra bread roll wrapped in a napkin. "Here," he said, "for later. But Grace, I promise you, the food won't stop. This isn't a test. You're safe here." Her eyes filled with tears. "How can I believe that?" "Because I'm telling you. And I've never lied to you, have I?" She shook her head slowly, took the bread roll, held it like something precious. Cooper walked away feeling the weight of that promise, the responsibility of being believed. Over the next 3 days, he found himself doing more. Small acts that weren't required, weren't in his orders, but felt necessary. He brought Diana Shaw old magazines from the recreation room. She'd mentioned missing reading, cried when she saw them, said she hadn't read anything but military reports in 2 years. He arranged for Margaret Clark to see the camp doctor. She'd been having chronic headaches. The doctor found malnutrition-related issues, prescribed vitamins that actually helped. He requisitioned paper and pencils for all 43 women. They wanted to write home, needed supplies. Captain Mitchell approved, called it good initiative. The women noticed, started trusting him in small ways, asked him questions about America, about what would happen when they went home, about whether their families were still alive. And Cooper found himself caring about the answers. September 24th evening, Private Williams cornered him after dinner in the barracks, where the other MPs could hear. "Cooper, what the hell are you doing?" Cooper looked up from the letter he'd been writing to Betty. "What do you mean you're being soft on those Nazis, bringing them extra food, getting them magazines, acting like they're guests instead of prisoners? They're human beings who've been through hell." William's face reddened. "They're the enemy. They served Hitler. They don't deserve your kindness." Cooper stood, slowly. He had 3 inches on Williams. Use them. They were lied to, conscripted, starved by their own government. What exactly did they do that deserves more punishment? They wore the uniform. So do we. And if America had been the evil regime, would you have known? Would you have refused? Williams stepped back. That's different. Is it how the barracks had gone quiet, 6 other MPs watching, waiting to see whose side they'd take? Sergeant Bradford's voice cut through the tension. "Williams, Cooper, that's enough. Cooper, you're not fraternizing inappropriately with the prisoners. You're treating them humanely. That's all the captain asks." Dismissed. Williams glared but said nothing, walked away. That night, Cooper finished his letter to Betty, told her about the German women, about cotton candy, about learning that enemies were just people on the other side of lies. He sealed it. Didn't know if she'd understand, but he had to try. September 26th, town hall meeting. The town of Riverside held an emergency meeting. Cooper attended in civilian clothes, sat in the back, wanted to see how civilians viewed what was happening at the camp. The room was packed, maybe 200 people. Robert Harrison stood at the front, the man from the fair, the one who'd called them Nazis. "This harvest dinner invitation," Harrison said, his voice carried, "it's an insult. My nephew died fighting these people. Now we want to break bread with them." Applause, loud, maybe 40% of the room. Eleanor Walsh stood, Sarah's mother, the woman who'd advocated for bringing the prisoners to the fair. "Robert, my nephew, died too, at Normandy, but I don't think he'd want me to hate in his name. I think he'd want me to build peace, peace with Nazis, with women who were lied to, with human beings who deserve redemption." The debate went back and forth, heated, passionate. Cooper watched Americans argue about whether enemies deserved compassion, whether forgiveness was strength or weakness, whether mercy had limits. He couldn't stay silent. He stood. All eyes turned to him. "May I speak?" The town council moderator looked uncertain. "You're not a resident." "No, sir, but I guard these women. I know them." "Then speak." Cooper moved to the center aisle, felt 200 pairs of eyes on him. I came to Camp Riverside hating Germans. My cousin died at Normandy. I wanted revenge on anyone who wore that uniform. The room was silent now. But these women aren't SS officers. They're a 19-year-old farm girl whose father died believing Nazi lies, a nurse who saved lives while starving herself, a supply coordinator who made sure younger women got extra rations even when she had nothing. He turned to Harrison. Sir, you want revenge. I understand. But revenge on who? On people who've already suffered more than we can imagine. That's not justice. That's just more cruelty. Harrison's face was hard. Easy for you to say, Private. You're young. You didn't fight. The words hit like a slap. Cooper felt the shame he always felt, that he'd never seen combat, that he'd stayed safe while others died. You're right, he said quietly. I didn't fight. I guard prisoners. And maybe that's my war. Not killing, but choosing not to hate. Maybe that's harder. The room erupted. Some applause, some jeers. The vote was called 7-5. The harvest dinner was approved. As people filed out, Harrison approached Cooper. I don't agree with you, Private, but I respect what you said. That took courage. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. I'm still voting no. But his voice was softer, less certain, like maybe Cooper's words had planted a seed. Cooper walked back to camp in the dark, found Ellen waiting by the gate. Private Cooper, someone told us about the town meeting. He stopped. How much did they tell you that you defended us? To civilians who hate us, that you risked your reputation? She stepped closer. Why have I? Cooper looked at her, really looked, saw not an enemy but a person trying to understand kindness from an unexpected source. Because you're making me question everything I thought I knew, and I don't like easy answers anymore. Ellen held his gaze. That is the first step, to real wisdom, to real peace, questioning the answers you were given. Yeah, it's also terrifying. Yes, her voice was soft. It is, but necessary. They stood there in the darkness, guard and prisoner, two people who'd become something neither had names for yet. September 27th to October 1st, the conversation started slowly. Cooper would find reasons to be near Ellen. She would find excuses to ask him questions. They talked about duty, about family, about the lies they'd both believed. One afternoon, Cooper saw her looking at a photograph. He approached without thinking. Family. Ellen, startled, handed him the photo, an older woman standing in front of a half-destroyed house. My mother, in Bavaria. I'm sorry about the destruction. War destroys everything, not just buildings. Ellen's voice was quiet. Soon I will go home and tell her that her government lied to her. That will destroy something else. Truth is hard, but necessary. You taught me that. Cooper looked at her confused. I didn't teach you anything. Yes, you did. By treating us like humans when you could have treated us like enemies. You showed that truth matters more than revenge. Another day, Ellen found him on guard duty. Evening. The camp quiet. Private Cooper, I heard you lost family in the war. He stiffened. Who told you that? You mentioned it at the town meeting. Someone repeated it to us. Yeah, cousin, Normandy. Silence stretched between them. I'm sorry, Ellen said finally. Not your fault. Maybe not mine specifically, but my country's, my uniforms. She paused. I cannot give you revenge, cannot bring him back. But I can say this, I am sorry for what my nation did, and I will spend the rest of my life making sure it never happens again. Cooper turned to face her, saw the sincerity in her gray eyes, the weight of genuine remorse. You really mean that? With everything I am. This, Cooper realized, was what justice actually looked like. Not punishment, but acknowledgement, change, the promise to be better. Thank you, he said, surprised by the emotion in his voice. That means more than you know. Ellen nodded, started to walk away, then turned back. You are a good man, Private Cooper. I hope you know that. Just doing my job. No, you are doing more. You are choosing humanity over hatred. That is not a trim. That is character. Cooper watched her disappear into the barracks, stood in the darkness feeling like the world had shifted again. Like everything was changing, and he couldn't stop it, even if he wanted to. October 2. Preparation. Captain Mitchell assigned Cooper to coordinate the harvest dinner logistics. Transport, security, civilian liaison. It was above his pay grade, but she trusted him. You've earned this, Cooper. These women trust you. The town respects you. Make it work. He took it seriously, not because of orders, because he was personally invested now. Wanted the women to have this moment. Wanted the town to see what he saw. He volunteered to help them prepare. Taught basic English phrases during evening sessions. Thank you for having us. This is delicious. We appreciate your kindness. The women laughed at his Nebraska accent. He laughed at their German English. It was the first time there'd been genuine laughter between them. The sound felt like hope. Grace asked him, "How do I say I am sorry for the war?" Cooper paused. "You don't have to apologize for things you didn't do. But my country did them. Your country's leaders did them. There's a difference." Grace looked uncertain. "In America, do you apologize for things your leaders do wrong?" The question hit hard. Cooper thought about Japanese internment camps, about segregation, about all the things America did wrong while claiming moral superiority. Sometimes, when we should. He met her eyes. "We're not perfect either, Grace. Nobody is." Anna Winters, the woman who'd been most resistant, refused initially to attend the dinner. Cooper found her alone in the barracks. "Miss Winters, why won't you go?" "Because I will not beg forgiveness from our enemies." "No one's asking you to beg, just to eat dinner with people. People who hate us. Some do, some don't. Won't know unless you try." Anna's face was hard. "Why do you care?" Cooper chose honesty. "Because I think you're still fighting a war that's over, and I don't want to see you lose your humanity to pride." Anna stared at him. Angry tears formed. "You know nothing about what I've lost." "You're right, but I know what you're about to lose if you stay angry. Your chance to be human again." She didn't respond, but 2 days later, she told Ellen she'd attend. October 4th, St. Mark's Lutheran Church. Cooper drove the lead truck. Ellen's group rode with him. The evening was cool, clear, perfect autumn weather. When they arrived at the church, he saw Eleanor Walsh waiting at the door. Welcoming, warm. Behind her, the basement glowed with light and the smell of roasted turkey drifted out. The women climbed down slowly, nervous. Cooper stayed close, not as a guard, as support. Inside, long tables covered in white cloths held more food than Cooper had seen outside a military mess hall. Turkey, potatoes, vegetables, bread, pies. Abundance that made several women stop walking. American families stood when they entered, not in hostility, in welcome. Pastor Henderson offered a prayer. Asked for peace and understanding and healing for all nations. His words were simple but carried weight. Several German women cried before he finished. Sarah Walsh had saved seats for Grace and her friends. Waved enthusiastically. Grace moved toward her with cautious hope. Cooper found himself sitting between worlds. Americans on one side, Germans on the other. Literally bridging the gap. The meal began awkwardly. Then conversations started flowing. Diana Shaw talked farming with an American agriculturalist. Margaret Clark discussed nursing with a volunteer medic. Ruth Baker learned about community organization from Eleanor Walsh. Cooper watched it happen. Watched enemies become people sharing food and stories. Watched division begin to heal over mashed potatoes and green beans. Then he saw Mrs. Dorothy Bergen stand up. She was 65, lost her son Henry at Normandy 16 months earlier. Cooper knew because everyone knew. Her grief was legendary. Her hatred of Germans had been absolute. She walked toward Ellen's table. Cooper stood instinctively, ready to intervene, to protect Ellen if needed. But Mrs. Bergen sat beside Ellen, reached across the table, placed her weathered hand over Ellen's. "My Henry would have wanted me to be here tonight." The room went quiet. "He wrote to me before he died, said he hoped when the war ended we'd remember that German soldiers had mothers too, that they were somebody's sons." She paused. "And daughters." Ellen's face crumpled. She tried to maintain composure but couldn't. Tears streamed down her face. "I'm so sorry," Elbin whispered. "So sorry for your loss." "I know you are, child. I can see it." Mrs. Bergen squeezed her hand. "And I forgive you, not because you asked, but because hate is too heavy to carry anymore." Cooper felt his own eyes burn. Around the room, people were crying. German women and American civilians watching forgiveness happen in real time. Then Robert Harrison stood. Cooper tensed. Harrison had voted against this dinner, had opposed every kindness toward the prisoners. Harrison walked to where Anna Winters sat alone, still resistant, still angry. He extended his hand. My nephew died at the Bulge, probably killed by people you served with. Anna flinched, looked ready to fight or flee. But, Harrison continued, I've spent 6 weeks being angry at you, and I'm tired, so let's just eat dinner. Okay, Anna stared at his hand, then slowly, carefully took it. The room exhaled collectively, the wound of war beginning to heal, one handshake at a time. Cooper stood there watching and understood. This was what victory actually looked like. Not defeating enemies, but making enemies into something else, something human. After dinner, Pastor Henderson played piano. Someone started singing, Germans and Americans together. Music as universal language where words failed. Cooper found Ellen near the door as people prepared to leave. Thank you, she said, for everything. I didn't do anything. You did. You saw us when you could have looked away. You chose compassion when hate was easier. She paused. You changed my life, Daniel Cooper. First time she'd used his first name. It felt significant, like a wall coming down. You changed mine too, Ellen Bradford. They stood there, guard and prisoner, two people who would become witnesses to the possibility of peace. October 5th morning, after Cooper woke to find Private Williams standing over his bunk. You're in love with her, Williams said, accusatory. That German woman. Ellen. Cooper sat up. No, I respect her. There's a difference, Verheckjum. Doesn't look like respect to me. Cooper stood, met Williams' eyes. Then you're not looking clearly. She's taught me that enemies are just people I haven't understood yet. That's not love. That's education. You're a traitor to your uniform. No, I'm finally understanding what the uniform actually means. Protecting people. All people. Not just the ones who look like me. Williams walked away, but Cooper could feel the rift growing. The other MPS watching, judging, choosing sides. That afternoon, Cooper made a decision. He'd write letters of recommendation for all 43 women to help them find work when they returned to Germany. It was above his duties, probably against some regulation, but it felt necessary. He spent 3 days writing, each letter personalized, each woman's character honestly assessed. For Ellen, he wrote about leadership and moral courage, about facing truth when it destroyed everything she believed. For Grace, about resilience and hope, about capacity for joy after tremendous hardship. For Anna, about the courage to choose forgiveness over anger, about transformation that demonstrated real strength. Captain Mitchell reviewed them. Cooper, this is above and beyond. They deserve it, ma'am. You've changed, Private. Yes, ma'am, they changed me. Mitchell studied him. For the better, I think. I hope so. That evening, Cooper finally mailed his letter to his mother, the one explaining everything, the one he'd been too scared to send. 2 weeks later, her response arrived. Son, your father would be proud. I am too. Come home safe. Love, Mom. Cooper read it 3 times. Let the words sink in. His family understood, or at least they were trying to. He walked to the women's barracks that evening, found Ellen outside, looking at stars. Good news, she asked. Must have seen his expression. Yeah, my mom. She understands what I've learned here. That is good. Family matters. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Ellen spoke again. We received notice today. Repatriation orders. December 15th. Cooper's chest tightened. 2 months. Yes, 2 months. Then we go home to whatever is left. You'll be okay. You're strong. Ellen turned to face him. I am strong because people like you reminded me that humanity exists, that kindness is real, that enemies can choose to see each other. I'm going to miss you, Cooper said, surprised himself by saying it out loud. I will miss you too, Daniel Cooper, the American soldier who taught a German prisoner that forgiveness is possible. They stood under the Pennsylvania stars, 2 people from opposite sides of a war, learning that the real battle wasn't between nations, but between hatred and hope. And that hope, given a chance, was stronger than anyone expected. Viet tiep part batheo dan I moi, voido die bon yin tu mui ba ba mui hai. Orchestrated emotional narrative conclusion with cinematic prose and structural twists. December Numuichin Bunwilam. The notice appeared on the mess hall bulletin board at 0700 hours. Cooper saw it during morning rounds. Black ink on white paper. Official military letterhead. The words that would change everything again. Repatriation orders finalized. Transport ship departs December 15, 1945. Destination Bremen, Germany. Processing through British occupation zone. 10 days. Cooper stood staring at the paper. Around him, camp life continued, soldiers moving between buildings, morning formations assembling. But for him, time had stopped. 10 days until 43 women climbed onto a ship and disappeared over the horizon. 10 days until he lost something he hadn't known mattered until it was ending. He found Ellen in the barracks. She was sitting on her cot holding the same notice. Her face was composed, but her hands shook slightly. The only sign of emotion she allowed herself. "You saw," Cooper said. Not a question. "Yes," her voice was steady. "December 15th. We finally go home." "Are you ready?" Ellen looked up at him. Her gray eyes held complicated emotions. "I should be happy, going home. But home is not home anymore. Everything I knew is gone. And leaving here feels like losing something precious." "What are you losing?" "Hope, proof that people can be good, evidence that kindness exists." She paused. "You." The admission hung between them. Cooper felt it settle into his chest, heavy and warm and terrifying. "You'll take all that with you," he said, "in your memories." "Memory fades, Daniel. Not this kind. This kind stays forever." Cooper requested permission from Captain Mitchell to accompany the women to the port of New York, to see them off properly. Mitchell approved without hesitation. "You've earned that right, Cooper. More than earned it." The next 10 days moved too fast and too slow simultaneously. Cooper found himself memorizing details. The way Ellen stood when addressing her group, the sound of Grace's laugh when Sarah Walsh visited one last time, the quiet strength in Margaret's analytical observations, the transformation in Anna from angry hardliner to woman learning forgiveness. He wanted to hold all of it, preserve it, make sure it couldn't be erased by time or distance. December 6th to December 10th. The women spent their remaining days writing letters home. Cooper had provided supplies weeks ago, but most had struggled with what to say, how to explain the inexplicable, how to tell families that everything they believed was wrong. Now with departure imminent, the truth couldn't wait. Cooper found Ellen struggling over her letter one evening. She'd crossed out multiple attempts. The floor around her cot was littered with crumpled paper. "Need help?" he asked. She looked up frustrated. "How do I tell my mother that I learned her government lied to her, that everything she sacrificed for was based on deception?" Cooper sat on the adjacent cot, unauthorized, but neither cared about protocol anymore. "Tell her the truth. Start with cotton candy. Tell her about sugar spun into clouds, about Americans who shared instead of tortured, about the gap between what you were taught and what you found. What if it destroys her? What if it saves her? What if knowing the truth helps her rebuild on something real instead of lies?" Ellen considered this, picked up her pen, started writing again. This time the words flowed. Cooper watched her write, felt the intimacy of witnessing someone's honesty. When she finished, she handed him the letter. "Will you read it?" "Tell me if it's too much," he read slowly. About Camp Riverside, about county fairs and cotton candy, about Private Daniel Cooper who chose compassion over cruelty, about learning that enemies were just people who hadn't met yet. "It's perfect," he said. His voice was rough. "She needs to hear this from you." Grace wrote to her sister about Sarah Walsh, about an American girl who chose friendship across enemy lines. She showed Cooper her letter, worried about her English. "Is this okay? Will Anna understand?" Cooper read it, simple words carrying profound meaning. "It's beautiful, Grace. She'll treasure it." Margaret compiled her documentation with clinical precision. Cover letter to the International Red Cross, historical record of their treatment, evidence that humane prisoner treatment transformed rather than weakened. "Someone needs to know," she told Cooper. "That kindness works. That mercy is strategic, not soft." Anna wrote to her mother about forgiveness, about Robert Harrison who lost family but chose understanding, about how anger exhausted but forgiveness freed. Ruth wrote offering her organizational skills to relief efforts. Diana wrote about planting American seeds in German soil. Each woman processing what they'd learned through words on paper. Cooper wrote his own letters during this time. To Betty, his fiancée, explaining everything. The German women, the transformation, the fear that she wouldn't understand why he'd changed. He sealed it, mailed it, waited. 3 days later, Betty arrived unannounced. Drove 5 hours from her family's farm to Camp Riverside. Found Cooper on duty and asked to speak with him. His heart pounded as they walked to a private area. This was it. The moment she'd tell him she couldn't accept who he'd become. Tell me about them, Betty said. These women who changed you. So Cooper talked. For 2 hours. About Ellen and Grace and Margaret and all 43. About cotton candy and harvest dinners and learning to see humans instead of enemies. About discovering that hatred was easier, but compassion was stronger. Betty listened without interrupting. Tears formed in her eyes, but she let him finish. When he stopped talking, she took his hands. Daniel, I was worried the war would make you hard, cruel, like some men who came back. She squeezed his fingers. Instead, it made you compassionate, wise, able to see past easy answers. That's the man I want to marry. Relief flooded through Cooper so intensely he almost collapsed. You understand. I understand that you met people who taught you something important. That enemies are just people we haven't understood yet, and that truth matters more than comfortable lies. She smiled. That's not weakness, that's growth. They held each other while Pennsylvania winter wind blew around them. Two people choosing to build a future on truth instead of hatred. December 11th to December 14th. The town of Riverside organized farewell events. Eleanor Walsh coordinated everything, small gestures of massive kindness. A church service where Pastor Henderson honored the women's journey. Sarah Walsh gave each woman a handmade bracelet. So you remember us, she said through tears. Grace held hers like something sacred. I will wear this forever. A gathering in town square, 50 townspeople showing up. Some hostile, still, most kind. Robert Harrison shook each woman's hand. Safe journey, build something better than what was destroyed. Farmer Thompson brought seeds, for Diana and Ruth and Margaret, for anyone who'd plant them. Mix old with new, he said. That's how you get the strongest crops. Diana cried, promised to plant a field in his honor. Care packages appeared, from people the women had never met. Hard candies wrapped in colored paper, warm socks knitted by church ladies, bars of soap, small notebooks, Americans giving freely to former enemies. Ellen showed Cooper her package. Inside was a note from Eleanor Walsh. You taught Sarah more than you know. She wants to work for peace when she grows up. That's your influence. Never doubt your presence mattered. Cooper watched Ellen read it, watched tears she couldn't hide anymore. We did matter, she whispered, even as prisoners, even as enemies. We mattered. You always mattered. Some of us just took longer to see it. Cooper said private goodbyes over those final days. Margaret gave him a copy of her documentation. In case the original is lost, someone should have this. Someone who understands. I'll keep it safe, I have a promise. You are a good man, Private Cooper. Don't forget what you learned here. Ruth thanked him for his organizational skills. You have a talent for bringing people together. Remember that. Dana asked him to tell Farmer Thompson she'd write when the seeds grew. Anna, the woman who'd resisted longest, hugged him. First time she'd touched him voluntarily. You showed me forgiveness isn't weakness. I'll teach that in Germany. Grace cried hardest. She'd become attached to Cooper like a protective older brother. I don't want to leave Sarah or you. I know, but you have to help rebuild Germany, and you'll write to Sarah. Stay friends. Will you write too? If I can, I will, I promise. December 14th, final evening, Cooper found Ellen outside the barracks. She was looking at stars again, same as she'd done before the harvest dinner, before everything changed. Nervous, he asked, beyond words. She turned to face him. Daniel, I need to tell you something. What? When I arrived here in August, I expected cruelty. I planned to endure it with dignity and silence, to survive until repatriation, to give you nothing. But you showed me kindness instead, and it broke me open in ways cruelty never could. Her voice carried weight. Cruelty I could resist, kindness I had to accept, and accepting it meant accepting truth. that I was wrong about America, about enemies, about everything. She stepped closer. You changed my life, Daniel Cooper. Cooper felt emotion rise in his throat. You changed mine too, Ellen Bradford. They stood under stars that shone on both America and Germany, on all the places humans divided themselves with borders and flags and lies. I wish we'd met in different circumstances, Ellen said. Me too, but maybe these circumstances were necessary to teach us what we needed to learn. Perhaps. She was quiet for a moment. Will you remember me? For the rest of my life. Good, because I'll remember you. The American soldier who chose humanity over hatred. December 15th, 1945. The trucks came at 0500, still dark, cold. Cooper had barely slept. He helped load minimal possessions. 43 women carrying so little. Everything they owned fit in small bags. But they carried more than physical items. They carried lessons learned. Truth discovered. Proof that transformation was possible. Captain Mitchell addressed them one final time. You came as prisoners. You leave as witnesses to the possibility of peace. Carry that home. Build something worthy of the suffering you endured. The women saluted. First time Cooper had seen them salute with pride instead of fear. Sarah and Eleanor Walsh arrived in the pre-dawn darkness. Couldn't let Grace leave without goodbye. The two girls clung to each other, 12 and 19, American and German, friends who proved geography didn't determine humanity. Write to me, Sarah sobbed. Every week, I promise. Forever. Cooper drove the lead truck. Ellen's group rode with him. The drive to New York took 4 hours, silent mostly, everyone processing endings. He broke the silence somewhere in New Jersey. What will you do first when you get home? Ellen answered. Find my mother, tell her the truth. Diana said, plant the seeds. Ruth, organize relief efforts. Margaret, document everything. Make sure history remembers accurately. Anna, forgive, starting with myself. Grace, voice small. Hug my sister, if she's alive. The USS General W.P. Richardson waited at port. Massive ship, hundreds of displaced persons boarding. Not just Germans, all kinds of people going to uncertain homes. Cooper's job ended at the gangplank. Official duty complete. But he couldn't just drop them and leave. He gathered all 43 women. Last time they'd be together with him present. I need to say something. They circled around, waiting. Cooper's voice shook slightly. I came to Camp Riverside thinking I knew who you were. Enemies, Nazis, people to hate. He paused. But you taught me I was wrong. You're not enemies. You're people who were lied to, just like we all were. He looked at each face, memorized them. You showed me that courage isn't just fighting. It's facing truth even when it destroys everything you believed. And I want you to know, you made me a better man. Thank you. Several women cried openly now. Ellen stepped forward. Private Cooper, we thank you for treating us like humans when you could have treated us like enemies, for choosing compassion over cruelty, for being proof that Americans are not monsters. She paused. We will tell everyone we meet about Daniel Cooper, the soldier who chose kindness. Individual goodbyes happened quickly, too quickly. Margaret's firm handshake, Ruth's grateful nod, Diana's promise to remember, Anna's unexpected embrace. Grace clung to him longest. Tell Sarah I love her. Tell her I'll write. I will. I promise. Then Ellen, last. They stood facing each other while hundreds of people moved around them. Goodbye, Daniel Cooper. Goodbye, Ellen Bradford. Don't forget what you learned here. Never. Do you promise the same? I promise. She extended her hand. He took it, held it for a moment, then let go. The women walked up the gangplank. 43 individuals Cooper had come to know, not as prisoners or enemies, but as people. Ellen was last to board. At the top, she turned, looked back, waved. Cooper waved back. She disappeared into the ship. Cooper stood on the dock. The ship's horn bellowed. Gangplank raised. The vessel began pulling away. Slowly, inexorably. He stood there for 3 hours, until the ship disappeared over the horizon. People thought he was crazy, but he needed to witness the end. the completion of something that mattered. His personal war, not the global conflict that ended in August, but his private war against hatred, against easy answers, against seeing people as enemies instead of humans. That war ended as the ship became a dot, then nothing, a voice behind him. Private Cooper. He turned. Robert Harrison stood there, the man from the fair, from the town meeting, the one who'd opposed everything. Mr. Harrison, what are you doing here? I followed you, wanted to thank you. For what? For showing an old man it's never too late to choose forgiveness over anger. Harrison's voice was thick with emotion. I wrote to the German Red Cross, asked them to help me find the family of the soldier who killed my nephew. I want to tell them I forgive him, and I'm sorry for their loss too. Cooper stared, stunned. Mr. Harrison, that's incredible. You inspired it, you and those women. If they can forgive, so can I. They shook hands, two men who'd started as adversaries. Learning that the hardest battles were fought in the human heart, Cooper drove back to Camp Riverside alone. The barracks where 43 women had lived sat empty. Their absence was physical, tangible. The camp felt hollow without them. That night he wrote in his journal, trying to capture everything before memory could soften or distort it. The cotton candy moment, the harvest dinner, Mrs. Bergen's forgiveness, Harrison's transformation, Ellen's final wave. He wrote until his hand cramped, until words failed to hold what he felt. June 1946, Nebraska. Cooper had been discharged in February, returned home, married Betty in April. They were working his family's farm now, trying to build a life in peacetime. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, international postage, German stamps, Ellen's handwriting. Cooper's hands shook as he opened it. Dear Daniel, I am home. Bavaria is destroyed, worse than I imagined. But I found my mother alive. We are together. I told her everything. About Camp Riverside, about cotton candy, about you. She cried for 3 days. Then she said we must tell everyone. We are trying, holding community meetings, sharing truth. Some believe, some don't, but we persist. Thank you for giving me courage to tell truth. Ellen Bradford. More letters followed over the coming months. Grace wrote that she'd found her sister alive, that they were together with their mother in a British zone camp, that she'd planted Farmer Thompson's seeds and a small garden was growing, that she was teaching English to children and telling them about Sarah and kindness and hope. Margaret wrote that the Red Cross had received her documentation, that they were using it for historical records, for education about propaganda, that Cooper's letter of recommendation had helped her get a job with British Relief. Anna wrote about leading reconciliation groups, teaching forgiveness, using Robert Harrison as an example, that people were slowly listening, slowly changing. Cooper shared the letters with Betty over dinner. She listened with tears in her eyes. You changed their lives, Daniel. They changed mine first. He wrote back to each woman, shared news from America, from Nebraska, from Riverside, Pennsylvania, told them about Harrison finding the German soldier's family, about Sarah Walsh starting high school and wanting to study international relations, about Farmer Thompson's successful harvest, told them their impact was spreading, that ripples of compassion extended farther than anyone knew. Betty encouraged him to write everything down, create a record. But Cooper wasn't ready. The memories were too fresh, too raw. He needed time to understand what it all meant. So he kept notebooks, filled them with conversations and observations, with lessons learned, not for publication, just to remember. December 2005, Nebraska. Cooper finishes his story. Emily has been silent for the last hour. The recording device has captured everything. 6 hours of testimony. Grandpa, she says finally, her voice is awed. That's the most incredible thing I've ever heard. It's just a small story. 43 women, one guard, a few months. No. Emily's voice is firm. It's everything. You learn to see enemies as humans. In a world that told you to hate, you chose compassion. That's the most important story there is. Cooper stands slowly, walks to a closet, returns with a wooden box. Inside are 60 years of letters from Ellen and Grace and Margaret and all the others. Photos of their families, of their rebuilt lives, Margaret's original documentation. A hard candy wrapper from Eleanor Walsh's gift. Cooper's journals. You kept everything, Emily breathes. Of course, how could I not? These women gave me the gift of perspective, taught me the world isn't divided into good guys and bad guys, just people, making choices, every day. Can I use this for my thesis, tell the story? Cooper looks at his granddaughter, sees her earnestness, her desire to share truth. Yes, tell it. The world needs these stories, needs to know that enemies can become friends, that forgiveness is possible, that one person choosing kindness can change everything. Emily hugs him. Thank you, Grandpa. After she leaves, Cooper sits alone. Betty passed 2 years ago. His children are scattered across the country. The farmhouse is quiet. He opens the box again, reads his favorite passages. Ellen's first letter, Grace's joy about her sister, Margaret's thanks, Anna's transformation. The phone rings, international call, Germany. Mr. Cooper, this is Helena Muller, Grace Miller's granddaughter. Cooper's heart pounds. Is Grace okay? She's well. She asked me to call. She's too emotional to speak herself. She heard about your interview today, about Camp Riverside. She wants you to know she still has Sarah's bracelet. After 60 years, and she still tastes cotton candy every year, on September 21st, to remember. Cooper's vision blurs. Tell her I remember too. Every detail. Tell her she changed my life. She knows. She says you changed hers first. After the call, Cooper sits in darkness, thinking about 43 women, about Captain Mitchell's vision, about Sarah Walsh's innocence, about Robert Harrison's courage, about cotton candy dissolving on tongue but leaving impact that lasted decades. The next morning, a package arrives from Germany. Inside is a jar of homemade hard candies wrapped in colored paper, a note in shaky handwriting. Daniel, I made these myself, for you. So you remember that sweetness can last. Thank you for being the American who taught me that enemies are just friends we haven't made yet. All my love, Grace. Cooper unwraps one candy, places it in his mouth. The sweetness spreads across his tongue, different from cotton candy. This doesn't dissolve instantly. This lasts. He closes his eyes. For a moment, he's 22 again. Standing at Camp Riverside watching 43 women discover cotton candy for the first time. Watching enemies become humans. Watching hatred become hope. The candy dissolves slowly, but the memory remains forever. Sharp, clear, undeniable. Cooper understands now what he's spent 60 years learning. That cotton candy taught the first lesson. That beautiful things are fragile. That lies dissolve quickly when touched by truth. But Grace's hard candy teaches the second lesson, the one that matters even more. That sweetness, real sweetness, the kind built on truth and compassion, and choosing humanity over hatred, that sweetness lasts, it endures. It survives decades and oceans and all the forces that try to divide us. He thinks about Ellen rebuilding Bavaria with truth, about Grace teaching English to German children and telling them about American friendship, about Margaret documenting humanity for history, about Anna leading reconciliation, about all 43 women carrying lessons learned back to a broken country and using them to build something better. He thinks about Robert Harrison forgiving the unforgivable, about Sarah Walsh growing up to be a diplomat working for peace, about Betty supporting his transformation when she could have rejected it, about Captain Mitchell risking her career to show prisoners dignity. He thinks about Emily preparing to tell this story to a new generation, to teach them that enemies are temporary, but humanity is permanent. The candy is almost gone now, just a sliver left. Cooper lets it rest on his tongue, savoring the last moment. This is what he learned at 22 and has spent 60 years understanding. That war creates enemies, but peace requires seeing humans. That hatred is easy, but compassion is stronger. That lies dissolve like sugar on the tongue, but truth endures. That every person every single day chooses between hatred and hope, between division and connection, between seeing enemies or seeing people. And that one person making that choice, just one person like Private Daniel Cooper or Ellen Bradford or Grace Miller or Robert Harrison, that one person can change everything. The candy dissolves completely. The sweetness fades. But the lesson remains. Cooper opens his eyes, looks out at Nebraska winter, at the farm he's worked for 60 years, at the land where he learned to grow things, to nurture, to build instead of destroy. He picks up a pen, opens a fresh notebook, begins writing a letter. Dear Helena, please tell Grace her candy arrived. Tell her the sweetness lasted. Tell her I finally understand what she's been trying to teach me for 60 years. That the real miracle wasn't cotton candy dissolving. It was that the sweetness remained after the sugar was gone. That we carried that sweetness across oceans and decades. That we used it to build something better than what war destroyed. Tell her thank you for everything. For teaching an angry young soldier that enemies are just people waiting to be understood. Tell her I'm still learning that lesson every day, and I'll keep learning it until I die. With love and gratitude, Daniel Cooper. He seals the letter, addresses it, will mail it tomorrow. Tonight he sits in the quiet farmhouse, thinking about cotton candy and hard candy and all the ways sweetness teaches us. About 43 German women and one American soldier. About a few months in 1945 that changed everything. About the truth that enemies are just people we haven't met yet. And that meeting them, really meeting them, dissolves hatred as surely as sugar dissolves on the tongue, leaving only sweetness, only humanity, only hope. And that Cooper understands finally completely is enough. More than enough. It's everything.